Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome back to Watchbox. Start the week off right. Of course, this is Monday Mailbag, your show, your questions. We've got talking points, but as usual, we are willing to cast them aside to answer live from our chat box. I'm joined by Jason Main of Watchbox in Gothenburg.
I'm back.
Jason's back as well. He's happy to see you, and he's answering your questions as well. All right, Eddie Landsberg joining us in. I can see Bruno joining from Denmark, Eric Cecil from New York City, Matt Foster, Don Gizzle from Germany, Russell996, Get Out of the John Boy, Tom P., Philip Sebastian Peterson, Juan Huertas, Todd Piasecki, Shannon from Germany, greetings. Okay, tonight we've got questions, we've got queries, but we may as well start out with a reminder that the best way to buy, sell, and trade your watches is at thewatchbox.com. I've got a couple of saved searches for brand pages and new arrivals that I actually check daily. And of course, speaking of watches, let's do some wrist shots. I'll lead off today. So this is my JLC Platinum Reverso number 2. It's a tourbillon with a white gold caliber, and this is the watch that gets the most wrist time for me. It was a big Grail style watch that I dreamed about for years, and recently I've been on a kick with the Duomet chronograph, the Amvox 2, but it's time to get this guy back on. Of course, a combination of a 42mm lug-to-lug platinum case, ruthenium coated 18-karat white gold dial with a coaxial power reserve. Those numerals are hand-painted. I love it. It's a little giant. Jason, what you got tonight?
I'm going to do the controversial off-the-wrist shot. For once, so as you can see, it's been worn, but that's the 114060. I love this watch. You know, we've talked about it before a long time. Should I pull the trigger? Should I not? So happy that I did. Watch is great, very versatile watch.
All right, now, because people have seen this watch before, you're going to add extra value tonight. You got something that's
a little extra pop, so something we haven't done in a little while since I've been on. Got a little
this is
little
more
blade action for you guys.
This is more shot show than wrist shot.
So this is from a very good friend of mine. It's a custom knife. His name is Jonas Iglesias. This is the model he calls the Volt. So you got green G10 micarta, canvas micarta, and titanium. And that's a full hand-built, no modern technology. This is all done by hand, custom knife.
All right, so as you can see tonight, Andrew ST12 is wearing the same watch as Jason. You have excellent taste, Andrew. Congrats. A great choice. And the ultimate sub, many will say. Connery never wore a date. All right, so we're going to launch right into our this or that tonight. I'm going to give you the facts on 2 watches. Jason is going to pick the one he would rather own, but there's a catch. Tonight, this is Monday Mailbag, so this is actually a user-submitted this or that. I want to thank Ariza L. from Mexico, who specifically asked us about tonight's steel Pilots watches. That's right, we are comparing the Iwc Big Pilots watch versus the Breguet Type XXI 3817. So, in terms of price, they're surprisingly close, despite being relatively disparate in their design and dimensions. So let's start with the Iwc Big Pilots watch. This is the 5009-12, originally released in the latest year of the Pilots watch, 2016. That was at SIHH. The watch is still 46 millimeters across the round. It still has a 10 millimeter diameter crown. It's still 16 millimeters thick. Restored some of the Gen 1 features that people loved in the original 5002. You can see the progression from the 5002 to the 4 to the 9, and the 912 being the latest version. You can see that the numeral 9 on the dial has returned, and the double dot triangular index at 12 likewise has returned. We have images of those 2 features right there for a little bit of a detail close-up. It's a watch that benefits from some close reading because there are subtle distinctions between generations. Now, this generation transitions to a pilot-specific riveted calfskin strap, which is a bit different after years of alligator, more appropriate for a pilot's watch, full steel deploying clasp, tri-motor case back. This one actually has robust anti-magnetism because of a soft iron inner cage. The flip side of that is you don't get to see the movement. You see a Junkers Ju-52 back there, which is kind of fun because IWC supports a vintage aircraft, including a 52, and it's powered by the Calibre 51111, automatic winding with a 7-day power reserve, free sprung with a Breguet overcoil. It's accurate and it's shock resistant. That also because of the Peloton pawl-based winding system, which is both efficient and fairly shock resistant for an automatic system. Of course, hacking seconds, quick set date, IWC's own in-house movement. It is the world's largest automatic winding caliber to this day. 60 meters water resistant, so not truly an aquatic watch, but very anti-magnetic, $12,900 US. Okay, so another aviator watch from, believe it or not, a similar historic thread as the IWC draws on the history of the BR, a 1940s Luftwaffe pilot's watch. This is Breguet drawing on the history of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s Type 20 and Type 21 designs. Originally commissioned by French aeronautical military forces in the early 1950s. 1954 was the first year the Aéronaval requested a flyback chronograph. Now this watch actually came out in 2016, the reference 3817, 42 millimeters in stainless steel, about 15 millimeters thick. This is a watch that is notable for a few upgrades aesthetically, including the slate dial with the chocolate-colored simulated vintage patina and oversized Arabic numerals. Same treatment on the hands. This is calfskin with a full steel clasp, so a deluxe strap and buckle. It features a flyback chronograph, again with real history dating back to 1954, not quite as old as the IWC, but again a real tradition. It's not a made-up watch. It also features a useful radial minutes display. If you look at it from the side, you can actually see the minute in the second hand for the chronograph at the center of the dial overlapping, making it really easy to read. And yes, it's a flyback. It features a rotating bezel that adds yet another measure of ease of timing, 2 concurrent events now versus the IWC, and of course a modified Calibre 580-42 based on an old Lamagna. Now, for the first time in this model, with the display case back, free sprung with a silicone hairspring, 48-hour power reserve. It doesn't hack, but it does have a quick set date, and of course it's a flyback, rose lathe engraved rotor. 100 meters water resistant, so it's more aquatic than the IWC. $13,900, so $1,000 dearer and 4 millimeters smaller. Which one would you buy as your everyday watch?
So, Ariza, great question, although I gotta say this is too easy. Next time we'll do a little bit harder. For me, hands down, I mean, just look at that case back. Hands down has to be the Breguet. Gorgeous watch. I actually, so the 3817, since it came out, it's so warm. That dial, that slate dial, that watch, since it came out, I've actually thought about owning it for myself a few times. Just can't quite get there on price, but I think if you compare that to the IWC, and knowing myself, generally I will tend to go towards the non-complicated timepieces, you know, like the sub and the Panerai. I prefer a cleaner look. But this Breguet, there's just something about this specific reference of this Breguet that's always done it for me. I love the watch, and I actually want one for myself. And not knock against IWC, but I don't think you can compare it. The flyback chrono, exhibition case back, that bezel, that dial, for me, it's a winner.
This is an incredible watch because on so many levels it just connects. 42 millimeters is a versatile size. It's a pilot's watch, but it's also 100 meters water resistant. It's got a bulletproof old Lamagna caliber in there that Chuck Maddox spent years of his life writing about. He wrote love letters to this movement, and he was effectively the authority in cam-style modern chronograph calibers. But it's also been hot-rodded with hand finishing, modern enhancements like the free-sprung architecture, like the silicone hairspring. There's a lot going for this watch. It's beautiful on both sides, and I have to admit that it's the first Breguet Type 20 or 21 that I could ever actually see myself wearing. Yeah. It's got style and it's got soul, and again, it's not a what-if watch. This is real history, just like the IWC.
Yeah. It's handsome, it stands out, it's definitely a winner on the wrist, and versatile size, like you said. I think the Big Pilot suffers from a lot of people not being able to wear the watch, so the 42 is perfect.
All right, so let's see what you guys had to say. All right, so I can see that Cam joining a little late saying hi, Simon Holt. All right, Get Out of the John Boy saying the IWC looks cheap like a Seiko. I'm not sure I would consider all Seikos cheap looking. The IWC does have a look that's unfortunately become generic because it's almost become a parody of itself because it's been so widely copied. I can see right here, Watch Yoda is saying he would take the Type 20 or Type 21 because it's not as common. Also, Breguet is a step up in finish and spec, and that's certainly the case. AMG, our friend, also brothers in arms with Mercedes-Benz fans out there, he's a fan of the Big Pilots, and I can see right here we have a comment from Simon Holt saying, what is the Breguet like on the secondary market? Do you have any insight? Like, I think the IWC is probably stronger.
You would think. I like the Breguet all day long. I'd put my money in that watch before I did the IWC. I think there's quite a big bit of big pilots out there on the market, and while it might not be this specific big pilot, there's so many limited edition big pilots out there that it kind of becomes very hard to become interested in buying one or selling one for that matter. So I think the Breguet has that feel to it that makes the watch special. When you hold the watch, it feels special, which is in turn makes it easier to sell and trade.
And I would also say this, if you wanted to make the best play for resale value in a modern Breguet bought new, it would be this model. A steel sports watch from a bedrock collection that's been around forever. This is their, I'm not going to say it's their version of the 5711 because there's no comparison, but in terms of retained value, this is about as good as it gets in Breguet.
Yeah, it's definitely their rock star.
And also I can see Simon Holt saying his comment about the Breguet on the secondary market, it's as strong as Breguet gets. Not maybe quite as strong as the IWC, but Jason says it might actually draw even. Ryan Mann saying Breguet definitely. Russell 996, Breguet gets my votes. Sebastian Palacio saying Pilots watches are designed to be simple, easy to read. Anything else inspired in Pilots watches, but not the historic design. AMG saying big Pilots watches are all about legibility. So he votes for the IWC. Todd Piasecki, Breguet on this day. Edouard saying the Breguet all the way. And of course we have a comment from Eric Nielsen, our friend from Europe, definitely the Breguet. Ryan Mann loving the coined edge on the Breguet. Andrew Holt, he likes the IWC Big Pilot Top Gun Perpetual Calendar. Not an option in this particular this or that, but a good choice. All right, so launching into the questions tonight, I want to first remind you that the fun doesn't stop when the broadcast ends. Stay with me, Tim_Masso on Instagram. I update nightly. I like to do video posts because it's kind of my style. Static isn't always my way. So Tim_Masso, follow me on Instagram. Also comment in the description if you're watching this recorded, and please subscribe if you like what you see. That said, I asked and you answered. User wrist shots. I've gotten so many of these that we're actually going to have 3 installments of them in tonight's show. So wrist shots, Rich Buddy from the OC shows us his Ball Storm Chaser Glow DLC. A rugged sports timepiece that is blackened and big, highly legible, and relatively simple. We have the Ball Storm Chaser Glow DLC. It's actually a limited edition. You can see it there on his wrist. You can see that lume really takes center stage with this watch. Of course, Ball watches in the modern era known for their use of tritium and tracers. This one probably glows like a torch at night in the fashion of, well, any large sports watch that's going to scorch your retina, and this certainly qualifies. Rich Buddy, congrats. Russell K. forwards his Ulysse Nardin Tellurium Johann Kepler. Now, this is an interesting watch because not only is it basically an astronomical complication by Ludwig Oxlin and part of the original trilogy of time, but it has an extraordinary enameled dial. So not just mechanically beautiful, but aesthetically and artistically beautiful. I believe back when we had our eclipse in midsummer, this was one of the few watches that I said was capable of actually predicting and charting the time of the eclipse. It has that kind of sophistication. And then finally, Philip S. shares his Eterna Royal Kontiki. Of course, the Kontiki name dating back to the 1950s with Eterna, and you can see this one dating back to the 70s in its style. This is very much of the integrated bracelet, lug, and case Gerald Genta era. Beautiful combination of a white metal and a black dial. Congrats, Philip. That is a handsome timepiece. Guys, if you want to see your watch on my screen, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com. We're going to be taking off wrist shots every couple of minutes during this broadcast tonight. All right. So I can see Captain Zed saying tonight he's wearing an IWC Big Pilot Heritage. That's a monster watch in either 48 or 55. Which one are you wearing, 48 or 55? And I can see that Hayden is saying, what do you think about the planetarium on the Christian Vanderclaw? Definitely interesting. I think the planetarium is probably the most distinctive and memorable of his watches. He uses rock-solid, mass-produced base calibers, so in a lot of ways you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting an artisanal, independent horology timepiece, and you're getting something that's probably indefinitely maintainable. Also, if you're into that, though, check out the watches that he's built for Von Cleef and Arpels, because he kind of moonlights for them as well. So check out both, but I think his planetarium is one of the coolest watches you can buy from an independent. Nothing quite like seeing the cosmos on your wrist orbiting relative to each other in real time. Okay, so now I see Sebastian saying, Tim, you got to make a review on that Zenith Type 20 Tourbillon. That's a real pilot's watch. Okay, well, let me get one within my grasp and we'll work on that. If you know something about my inventory that I don't, remember, you might actually beat me to the punch on thewatchbox.com because that is updated multiple times per day and I can only check about 2 or 3. All right. So moving on to viewer questions, edu.dental asks a quick question. What exactly is an overcoil hairspring in your own words? Now, Jason, you're wearing a watch with an overcoil hairspring right there.
I am.
And it is a chronometer, is it not?
It is.
And that is the Parachrome blue alloy?
Correct.
Okay, show our friends right there what your watch looks like one more time for those who are joining late. Because I want you guys to know that an overcoil is not some rare and exotic equipment that you don't find in normal watches. That right there features an overcoil. So Daniel is asking...
Are you saying my stainless steel sub is not rare and very hard to find?
Oh, no, of course.
So
it's the only one that's Jason Main's,
there you go.
114060.
It's definitely got some unique scars.
It's a piece unique, thanks to your many unique markings. Okay, so he's put his dents in that watch. We're going to put a dent in this topic. So he's asking, what is an overcoil hairspring? He says the online explanations don't suffice. Well, here's the thing. If you imagine a flat hairspring, imagine it sitting, no guys, the flat hairspring. Bring up, yeah, there we go. Okay, so you imagine a flat hairspring sitting on a table. You can see with your eye, no need to measure, that the mass of that thing is not centered. One side is relatively heavier than the other. So the result is that when you start turning the watch through different positions with respect to gravity, because it's unequal in its mass and its center of gravity, certain positions like crown up, crown down, the watch is going to beat faster. In other positions, it's going to beat more slowly. So it'll lose and it'll gain time. Now, because it has more mass on the one side, it can never inherently be concentric in its beating. To do that, an overcoil takes the outer end of that hairspring, that's the terminal end that's uncoupled from anything, and would normally mount to the stud, and it bends it back across the middle. So you can see that overcoil and how it doubles back over on itself to center its gravity and promote concentric beating in any position. Now, if that sounds like the reason Breguet also invented the tourbillon, you're absolutely correct, to effectively minimize the influence of gravity on a watch. But whereas a tourbillon pocket watch would sit in one position with respect to gravity and then rotate, the wristwatch will come into many orientations with respect to gravity. So the overcoil actually works better for a wristwatch application. Some who like to style will use multiple axes to the tourbillon and an overcoil, and that would be the likes of your Grubel 4C or your JLC. Now here's the thing. By creating the overcoil extension, the watchmaker centers the mass, and so the rate isn't affected as much by position with respect to gravity. So when you see on a movement adjusted 3 positions, adjusted 5 positions, adjusted 6 positions, these are the positions that they're talking about, and this is what an overcoil does for you. It helps to basically cancel out the effect of gravity on all those different positions. Now, there are ways you can improve on an overcoil. Even better is a cylindrical hairspring with an overcoil, much like you would find on a vintage marine chronometer. You can see the overcoil, but you can also see that it's a 3-dimensional hairspring. And finally, best of all would be a spherical hairspring like the kind on a Jaeger LeCoultre Gyrotourbillon 3. I actually have a review of that on Watchbox Reviews, but you can see it looks like an AT&T logo because it takes the cylindrical architecture and now it makes it 3D top to bottom and side to side. So that's what an overcoil, a cylinder, and a spherical hairspring can do for the regularity of your watch. All right, comments and questions coming through. Shannon saying, I was actually shocked to see Tim without his sunglasses in the recent Watchbox Company video. Yeah, I had to kind of sober up a little bit, but other than the glasses, it was just all me, all real, total authenticity. I'm sure they had to clip out most of what I said because it was unpublishable. Jason, let me ask you a quick question. With respect to vintage watches, with respect to overcoil hairsprings, the #1 source is going to be pocket watches. Why don't people like pocket watches? Like, why don't watch collectors, we hardly ever buy them. Why is that?
Yeah, it's just I think as far as from a business perspective, we just don't really have the clientele, and there's not a ton of faith in the secondary market in pocket watches to invest money in them. I do know there's a small group of pocket watch only guys, that a lot of pocket watches that are of notable value just travel in between those guys. Kind of like forum guys and some of the weird off watches. But I think pocket watches are cool. I never really got into them. I know you can have some really cool movements for not a lot of money, which is fun. But at the end of the day, if you're not going to carry them around and use them, they just become drawer collectors, you know.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning. It's almost like they're evocative, but when you can buy a Grande complication for $20,000 and it's got a chronograph, a perpetual calendar, an enamel dial, a gold case, a minute repeater, there's got to be a reason for that. And I think the bottom line is that collectors just don't have interest because, you know, it's like, why don't people who collect fine Italian shoes also collect snow boots? At some point, they're so different that there's not as much overlap. But I will say this, the vintage watch movement and the collector movement started in the 70s and 80s with pocket watches. Back then, no one wanted wristwatches. It remains a niche to this day, but it is where the vintage movement started post-quartz crisis. Okay, guys, we are live tonight. We are taking your questions. Here's a question from I Like Watches. Tim, Parmigiani Tanda 1950 micro rotor versus a Lange Sohne Saxonia thin 37 millimeters. How does the Parmigiani stack up? Well, let's be clear. At about $10,000, the Parmigiani stacks up as much more affordable. Get it in black, 40 millimeter, micro rotor automatic. Technically, it's more interesting to me than the Lange, but the Lange costs thousands and thousands of dollars more because it's more beautifully made. The dial is silver, the case is gold, the movement is what's known as My Short or German silver, and it's hand finished. That's the difference between a Parmigiani Tanda at that price point and a Saxonia thin at 37. What do you think? Which do you go for?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely the Parmigiani is the more bang for the buck option. I think it's important that, you know, against the Lange, it's not as heavily finished and it doesn't quite stack up. But the watch, for what it is on its own, is a beautiful piece. And I think the Tanda, you can compare it to a lot of stuff in the $20,000 range. Just a beautiful watch.
Yeah, Parmigiani last year at SIHH knocked everyone out of the ballpark. I mean, they literally blew our minds with a $10,000 steel Tanda micro rotor that was effectively a watch they'd been selling at twice that price in the past in precious metal. And although it's not finished at the level of the Lange, it's still very, very good. It's not a generic finish. So personally, I like the Lange for its warmth. It would be my choice, but a black dial and a steel Tanda micro rotor, that would be worthy competition. So questions coming through right here. Alexi, our longtime viewer from Finland. Tim, is the Omega Calibre 1863, that is the display caseback version of the 1861 in the Moonwatch. Is it equipped with a lateral or a vertical clutch chrono? It is equipped with a lateral. And the way you know this is when you turn it over and you look through that display caseback, you'll see the lateral clutch moving side to side very subtly. You'll see its driving wheel mesh with the chronograph center wheel and then jump out about 1/4 of a millimeter. It's subtle, but you can see it. You'll also note that the clutch, such as it is, the driving wheel and the intermediate wheel, they're moving continuously because they're being driven off the 4th wheel of the time-telling drivetrain. So you can very easily see a lateral clutch moving in and out. Very few watches make the vertical clutch visible. It's just not an attractive arrangement, which is why every top-level Patek Philippe chronograph features a lateral clutch. It's more beautiful. Efficiency be damned. Okay. Sebastian Palacios asking, Tim and Jason, Vacheron Overseas versus Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. Jason, I'm going to let you focus the answer to that because it's a little bit open-ended, but what would your choice be given the range of everything that's available from each?
Available is a different side, but if I had to pick one watch here or there, the AP hands down right now. Secondary market speaks for it. I think overall, I like AP a lot better as a brand. I think Vacheron has some merit with a lot of their stuff. Some of the newer stuff, like the new 65s without the Geneva seal, kind of disappoints for me. And I think as a whole, a lot of people are kind of on the cusp of where Vacheron's going next, and I think Vacheron's also there as well. Kind of, you know, maybe something in the future. I like the AP better. I think secondary market speaks for itself. The AP is stronger. It's harder to get. If you can get one, I like the AP, 15400.
Okay. That's a diplomatic answer. A quick question, this one coming from Hachizenki, longtime viewer. Jason, do you own any Jerry Fisk custom knives?
I don't, but if you have one and you don't like it, send it to me and I'll check it out.
He also buys cutlery. All right. So More questions coming through. I'm going to answer that question from Sebastian. Vacheron Overseas versus Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. I think you have to take the full scope of what's out there, including watches that are now discontinued. On that basis, if you were to add it all up and someone told me, Tim, I can get you a A-Series 5402 with a Gen 1 Gayfer bracelet, I would probably have to say that. That's with the, that's with the 2121 ultra-thin JLC 920 based caliber. That is the first generation of the Royal Oak. If I can back it up and pick anything from the long anthology of the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak heritage, it would be that. That's hard to pass up. I would also say the Hourglass yellow gold green dial 15202 from 2015 would call to me. And I think it would be awfully difficult to say no to the new 15202 IP with a combination of a gradient blue tapisserie dial plus titanium and platinum hardware. All of that said, if I had to pick just one watch to keep, it would probably be the Audemars 5402. That said, not available. I would say recently, the one that's interested me most was the Overseas 49020 perpetual calendar chronograph. Now this is not Geneva Hallmark and it's not a display case back, but either the 80 pieces made in the boutique edition with the titanium bezel and the steel case with the yellow highlights on the dial, or the US boutique edition from 2011 with the red, white, and blue motif. Those are gorgeous watches to me. They're in the tradition of établissage or assembly of the best parts, which is Vacheron's heritage. Regardless of what people will say today, that's Vacheron's heritage. And historically, both JLC and Audemars Piguet would build watches in part or in whole for Vacheron. So you don't need the Geneva Hallmark or a manufacturer movement to be a true VC to me. So I would ultimately say an Overseas 49020 in steel, either boutique or US New York boutique. That would be my answer. Okay, what do you think of the Navitimer 8s, Jason? This is a question that's coming through from the field. This is from Ian Long. What do you think of the Navitimer 8 from Breitling?
So politically, I'd have to see one on my wrist first. My biased assumption is I don't like the watch yet. So they're at a disadvantage. I'm going to have to be swayed once I put one on my wrist, and it's really going to have to win me. I think design-wise, I think there's a lot lacking. It's not... I feel like Breitling had to make a move to get something out in the marketplace, and I don't think this was it, but we'll see.
Fair enough. I'll say I like the Unitime. I think the prices are competitive. Ultimately, the tale is going to be told in the hand and on the wrist. And in about a week and a half, I'm going to New York to see the entire collection in person. I'll be taking videos on the wrist impressions and giving you my unvarnished opinion of what they're like in the flesh. I think that will be the acid test for these watches. Some watches don't translate well in flat airbrushed or photoshopped press photos. Sometimes the people at the marketing agencies simply don't grasp what it is a collector is looking for, and then they tend to emphasize everything else in the promotional photos. All right, so moving through the questions tonight, we have a question from Ian C. Ian C asks, Tim, Lange watches are double assembled, and I understand that high-end Patek Philippe watches are also double assembled. Can you explain why this is and if the procedure is better? Okay, so it's a matter of due diligence in the assembly of very expensive and highly finished watches. Assembling the watch only once, immediately after the cleaning and manufacturing of the parts, they're made and then they're cleaned up, is lax quality control. Conditions that might inhibit the proper function of the watch are more likely to be caught during two separate builds and rebuilds. But here's the biggest reason when you deal with high-end Patek and all Lange. It's because newly manufactured components are tested for functional integrity. That is, the watch is built and it's run and it's evaluated over time before the parts are finished. So mechanically, they're ready to go. Aesthetically, they're not finished. And because the finishing can add 50% to the value of the watch, if you knew that there were problems mechanically with those parts, you would not then spend the time, the energy, and the money to make them aesthetically whole. You would replace them and then start over again. So that's why they're double assembled. First, to make sure that the parts work as mechanical components, and then to add all of the additional value as artisanal components that are fully finished. That's why top-end Patek and all Lange watches are double assembled. Consider the Zeitwerk repeater caliber. All right, it's got over 90 jewels and 771 parts. So considering the time and energy required to assemble, just to put it together once, that's a huge investment in time. If you were to finish all those parts before assembly and then find out that you'd wasted your time, that would be disastrous, especially with a company like Lange, where you look at the high-end complications and you've got maybe 2 or 3 people whose time is completely monopolized by building these watches. Force them to do it again. You also have a few people who are able to finish some of these components. You create a huge bottleneck by doing double work. So actually, double assembly prevents you from doing true double work, which would be double finishing. And ultimately, it's also important to note, because the screws used for this first assembly get worn the heck out. Lange actually has placeholder screws for the first assembly, which is the mechanical test, and then they have the final polished and blued screws. They use both for the time the watch goes together for final assembly and regulation. And that's the last phase, the assembly, regulation, and fine adjustments. And for good measure, here's Ian's Lange 1815 Moon Phase in honey gold for good measure, because we love to show user wrist shots. And because I asked and you answered, let me show you a few more wrist shots from our friends who did send them in. Bob L., one of our favorite clients and most interesting folks, sent us this image of his H. Moser & C. Venturer XL small seconds with, are you ready for the name of this? This is the official name, Cosmic Green Fumé. And if you look in the lower right-hand quadrant, Bob got a photo of a little bit more than the watch. That's the reverse wrist shot. Never seen one of those, have you? But we love Bob and we love that watch and we love Moser. Shannon from Germany, a longtime viewer who's always active in our chat box, shares his sharp Lange 1815 with the Saxomat automatic caliber. You can see it is the Saxomat micro rotor caliber L92, designed in the early 90s, still one of the most beautiful micro rotors with a gold rotor and a platinum mass. Shannon, thank you so much for forwarding that watch, one of the coolest time-only watches out there. And finally, Adam O's Rolex Daytona. Check this out. Okay, that's the ceramic bezel, but how sharp is that Jubilee bracelet on the ceramic Daytona? So if you were wondering, is it possible? Oh, hell yeah. And not only is it possible, it's awesome. Well done. I like that feat of imagination on a watch that so often is a cookie cutter piece. You wait in line to get the same one that everyone else has. You just hope to be first. Bob, or Adam I should say, Bob, great photograph. But Adam, awesome Jubilee bracelet. What do you think of the Daytona on the Jubilee?
It looks cool. I will say, before you guys start calling me and asking me to order your bracelet, Rolex does not sell bracelets by themselves.
Yeah, we didn't do that. That's not from us.
You have to own both watches to be able to make that happen. So if you have the pockets for it and you want that look, buy 2 watches.
Yeah. And you know, you could probably still buy those 2 watches even with the wait for a new Rolex for less than the price of a new 5711 in 6 weeks. Okay, so that looks awesome, that Jubilee. Adam, you killed it with that thing. Send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch on our screen. Okay, so question coming through about Ming watches and whether a Sellita in chronometer grade is worth the hype. Well, this is 2 questions. One, is a Sellita in chronometer grade a worthy addition? Yes, it is. Sellita is getting its act together in terms of quality, and to make a movement chronometer grade, it has to pass a certain threshold of component quality, hairspring, balance, roulage, mechanical finishing, regulation, such that some of the problems associated with Sellita in the past, i.e., lower grade parts and sloppy assembly that they used to be known for, they can't really pass muster if the watch is going to get a COSC certificate. So a good caliber, I endorse it in chronometer grade. Sellita improving every day. The Ming, Jason, is the Ming brand overhyped? Like when you see the watches trading for above list, is that beyond the pale? Is this like 7 Friday back in 2014?
Yeah, I think it's a piece that, to be quite frank, I think in a few years you end up regretting purchasing. Something you might get stuck with. It's definitely going to be hard to sell in a secondary. Super fun right now. If you can get one, you want to flip it, have it, you can own it for 6 months without having to worry about it. But I think it is like the 7 Fridays where you start to see them sell couple years down the road for $250, $300 on the secondary market. It's tough.
Yeah, so I would say buy it because you like it, because the cost is relatively low, your exposure is low. Just don't expect that any watch you buy in any price point, it will be indefinitely resellable for what you paid. Buy it because you'll love it, as with all things luxury. Okay, question coming in from Simon P. Tim, can you please explain Grande faux enamel dials in regard to Ulysse Nardin? Yes, I can. Ulysse Nardin has done enamel dials for a long time, but since 2012 they have been in-house. So since the 80s, we saw the beautiful tellurium Johann Kepler earlier on in the show, part of the trilogy of time that emerged from the 80s. And those watches with their enamel dials were created for Ulysse Nardin. Now, for the last really 20 years, Ulysse Nardin has been doing business with a company called Donze Cadran, which is an enamel dial specialist. They do other artisanal dials, but enamel, especially Grande faux enamel, has been their specialty. With Grande faux, you have to fire the dial multiple times, which means you start with a gold disc, you put the vitreous glass-based paint on, you fire it once, you put another layer on, you fire it again. And it can be up to 20 firings at 800 degrees Celsius, with the risk that, well, the dial will crack, it will fracture, it will explode. In 2012, Ulysse Nardin purchased Donze Cadran, so it became an in-house branch of the company, along with Sigitech, which made the original silicon parts for the Freak and the UN 160 anniversary watch. Ulysse Nardin purchased them too. So now they have that in-house capability to make enamel dials. They're able to offer them for a lot less money. They also have a lower rejection rate because they've invested in equipment. That's why you can see something like the Marine Flying Tourbillon with enamel dial for under 30,000 US dollars. And the Flinke style 2018 version is one you've got to see. Blue Flinke enamel with the Flying Tourbillon. But the reason this thing costs under $30,000 is because Ulysse Nardin owns Donze Cadran, and that is its exclusive supplier of enamel dials of all descriptions. Okay, so questions. Question coming in, how do I send a super chat? What's a super chat?
I think that's the what he's referring to, the chat on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
So just being part of the chat.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So yeah, to be part of the chat, you could just, it looks like you sent a message, you're part of the chat, you're in.
Plus you have to be subscribed to our Facebook, our Instagram, or have our app. Send him and I each cash in an envelope. There's tons of, we'll walk you through it. So.
Tim_Moss on Instagram. You're in, Herman. All right, so cool stuff going on. Robin Rickett saying, buy the Hulk, the Green Submariner, never a bad bet. Okay, so we're going to answer Mike K's question in just a second, but I do want to give a shout out. We have a question, John from Taipei. Thanks for joining us from the far-flung regions. We appreciate everyone who joins us from places where it's hard to watch us at a normal hour. This we appreciate, and if you're watching us recorded, we love that too. Okay, quick question from John. What are your thoughts on Glashütte Original's Pano Retrograph? It's been discontinued and not much information is available online. I always think it's a great movement with amazing decoration. You're right, by the way. Functions may be quirky, but quite useful as you can keep track of the time forward and backwards. My response, I'm a longtime fan of this watch, and longtime viewers are going to know that I've shouted this model out several times, but let's rewind. I would say that I've often highlighted its status as an epic pre-owned value, maybe the epic pre-owned value, alongside the Jump Hour Schaefer case Audemars Piguet minute repeaters from the early 90s, especially in the gorgeous rose gold case with black dial. This is a watch you have to consider at 1/2 to 1/3 of its original price. Now, here's the thing. The watch launched in 2000, that rose gold case launched in 2002. It's 39 millimeters in diameter, 50 made in platinum, 150 in white gold, unlimited in yellow and rose. This is a watch that was scarce because of the cost of purchasing it and limited advertising. Now, for those seeing the Pano Retrograph for the first time, it was launched just prior to the Swatch acquisition as the first of the Pano line. If you're familiar with the panorama or oversized date in Glashütte Original, this was the beginning of it in 2000, their answer to Lange and Lange's distinctive oversized date. But this is a watch that has no equivalent in any other catalog, Lange or otherwise. Calibre 6001 is a column wheel flyback countdown chronograph with a powerful chiming reminder as the minutes count down from 60, entirely hand-finished with a hand-engraved balance cock, immensely complicated. It also features encircling gongs that you can actually see there, worthy of a minute repeater. 42-hour manual wound power reserve, absolutely beautiful. The diminishing minute hand counts down across 3 concentric semicircles of 20 minutes on the dial. Unlike many high horology curiosities, and here's where it really comes out ahead against other weird stuff you can buy pre-owned, this one comes from a Swatch Group brand that remains and will remain around forever to service this watch. Look to pay $20,000 to $25,000 for that gorgeous rose gold model, and about $32,000 to $37,000 for the platinum and the white gold. This is a great watch to buy if you love complications and you want something that can go toe-to-toe with a datograph, but isn't a datograph. Have we ever brought one of these in?
I don't know that I've ever seen one, ever in my career with watches, not even with just this company, but I mean, it's certainly a cool looking watch. I think Geo gets a kind of a bad rap on the secondary market. I think they're fantastic watches for a pre-owned price. I wouldn't buy one retail, but great watches.
We have someone here saying Glasuta is not a brand. Not sure what they mean by that. I think maybe it's a reference to my pronunciation. I think I'm pretty on point there. Maybe not perfect, but I think decent for a non-native German speaker there. All right, so questions coming through from Jay Sykes. He has $10,000 burning a hole in his pocket. What recommendations in sport or sport dressy for $10,000? What do you recommend?
That's a good question. So one watch, or are we doing a sport and a dress?
Let's go with sport dressy. Give them your one and only. You got $10,000.
So,
blow it all if you want.
So I'm not a big dress watch guy per se. So if you're not going to go with the full steel and you want something two-tone, I happen to, the one two-tone watch that I really like right now is the Datejust 2 with the two-tone on the Jubilee with, you know, the green Romans on the gray dial, which is the, what do they nickname that watch? The
Wimbledon dial.
Wimbledon, yeah, there you go.
So, so a Wimbledon dial, Datejust 2, and I would say for $10,000, if you want to go for a chronograph, and again, I'm ruling out something like an Amvox 2 because maybe it's a little too overtly sporty. I would recommend you consider the Dark Side of the Moon or the Gray Side of the Moon. Very versatile watch, sporting demeanor, thin enough to fit under a cuff, very versatile, a real original, one of the best Speedmaster variants and families of the last decade. I would also say you need to consider something like a Jaeger LeCoultre Memovox. I would consider the Memovox International Limited Edition of 750 pieces because an alarm watch for me, for traveling, it doesn't get any better than that. And $10,000 might just about land you a Reverso, Grande Reverso Tribute to 1931 Rouge. Otherwise, I would say hugely underrated are the 216570 Polar Dial, the white dial Explorer 2s. If you can pull off a 42 on your wrist, and it's not a tough 42 to pull off, I would say that needs to be on your short list because it's one of the very few steel Rolex sports watches you can buy for below list right now. I see probably 3, 4, 5 of the black dials for every Polar white. I think it's had a relatively short life. I don't think it'll be continued that much longer. I do think the Polar Dial will be a collectible. Wear it. It's slim, it's elegant in a way that no rotating bezel Rolex sports watch can be. So that would be a short summary of watches I'd consider for 10 grand or less. Okay. Now we have a question from Zornell who says, I recently picked up a JLC Grande Ultra Thin 41, Master Grande Ultra Thin 41, and I love it. I sometimes change the strap between black, brown, and cognac depending on what I wear. It's formal with the black strap, casual with the brown. Do you think it can be worn as a daily wearer or is it too fragile? Guys, let's do a wrist shot real quick. Macro camera. This is what I wear every single day. It's a non-water resistant precious metal tourbillon with not one, but 2 crystals that are glued into place. If you can wear that every day, and you can, believe me, you can wear a JLC Master Grande Ultra Thin 41 that has a free-sprung movement from the geophysic. That's a Calibre 898. It's a tough modern architecture. The watch is 5 ATM water resistant, not the 2 or 3 that's common to the sports segment. It has a solid case back so you get even more durability. This is an everyday watch. You have a solid case back, and the Calibre 898 is an everyday movement. There's really no question. Wear with confidence. If you got to swim, maybe swap out to something else, but there's no reason not to wear this watch every day unless work for you involves something concussive like hammering nails or operating a jackhammer. You're good to go. Okay, so question from ST3 asking, does anyone think the Rolex Deep Sea will be discontinued at Basel? He's always fancied one, and he's thinking of buying one now while prices are soft. He's afraid they might shoot up if dropped. First of all, tell me, Jason, between the Deep Sea and the Deep Sea Deep Blue, which pricing is softer? Which one would you buy now, and do you think there's a chance it will be discontinued?
I do think that it will be discontinued, and not only that, furthermore, I hope it's discontinued. I think it's time to put it to bed. I think the new 43C Dweller kind of fixes all the problems that this watch had in terms of its total makeup and dimensions. I think the blacks are super soft right now compared to the Deep Blue, although I think if you're going to buy one, I'd buy the blue. Those seem to be holding a little bit better, and if the watch in overall is discontinued, the blue will still remain better than the black. There's tons of black stainless steel sport Rolexes. There's only one gradient blue to black dial.
Okay, so I think that's pretty much it right there. I would actually say that the real buy is the standard dial. People have said in the chats that I'm going off on the Deep Sea, that I'm all sorts of hard on the Deep Sea. I'm not. It's the most technically advanced Rolex dive watch ever sold to the public. It has a lot to recommend it. It is the best clasp Rolex has ever made. It's a tour de force technically, and it's almost indestructible. That said, there are some proportion issues with the disparity between the thickness and the diameter and the width of the case and the width of the bracelet. I would actually put it on a rubber B strap. That would be my choice. So I would say it's a buyer's market for that model. The one to get is the standard dial. We do think that it's been made redundant with the arrival of the Sea Dweller 43, and the time to buy probably is right now. Even if you want the Deep Blue, many available. You know, no seller has got you over a barrel, even with the Deep Blue. So I can see Herman Ingram clarifying, saying, Glashütte is not a brand, Glashütte is a place. Okay, well, Synecdoche being part of our routines, we tend to shorten the names of things to refer to the whole, but I will be sure in the future to refer to it as Geo or Glashütte Original. Okay, so moving down, I can see that we've got a great question, but first, before we address wrist shots, let's see some vintage guys. All right, Shamal's Gallet chronograph, this was sent to me over the weekend. So Shamal's actually, I believe, in Australia, and he sent me a picture of his Gallet chronograph with an Excelsior Park column wheel caliber 4. A really cool old school chronograph movement in an old school chronograph from a great brand. I love that watch. Well, we love those too, but not them. Technical difficulties. There we go, right there. And that is a 14 lean movement, so that is a decently sized watch too, on the upside of 35 millimeters. Shamal, thank you for sending that. Gerald Genta is well represented in Mert S's collection of steel high horology sportsters. But yeah, so Mert sent us this collection of steel, mostly Genta-derived sports watches. You can see you've got a Royal Oak in there. You've got Nautilus ×2 with a 5712 in the foreground and a 5711 1A with white dial in the background. A nice collection, thematically related, enviable. Those are all of the moment watches that will nevertheless remain timeless.
I think he wins the show.
Does he win the show?
Yeah, I think wrist shot goes to this gentleman here.
I give Bob credit for the kind of recursive image of his Moser, and I give Ricky from Scotland, our next wrist shot, the Innovation Award, because he's handed us something different with his GMT Master 2 BLNR with macro imagery. You can actually see that legendary BLNR bezel. And if we can go full screen with this, guys, I'll be most grateful. But you can see the Serichrome and the depth of the individual calibrations on the bezel. With the platinum infill, you can see that granular platinum infill inside the wells of the ceramic. Ricky, that is awesome stuff. Thank you so much. And if you can think of a similarly imaginative wrist shot or way of portraying your watch, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your watch or a piece of your watch on my screen. Okay. So Mike M saying Geo is a great manufacturer of timepieces. He loves them. I can also see that Fjord Prefect saying there's also Union Glasuta, which is true. That was kind of the junior brand of Glasuta Original during the 90s and 2000s, mostly faded away today. I can see questions coming through. Andrew WST saying Wimbledon dial date just. Geo is underrated from Ryan H. So many great under-the-radar models. Shh. Let's keep our panel retrographs and Senator diaries cheap on the pre-owned market, will we? Keep the best-kept secret. All right, so questions coming through. Nana Adoro asking, Tim, Reverso Classic Medium or Master Control Date Black Dial? Without hesitation, Master Control Date Black Dial. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's the right choice. I think for 99% of guys, the Reverso just isn't feasible. I think that's a hard secondary thought. Like, a lot of guys just aren't sure if they can wear it. And I think this speaks to a larger audience.
Yeah, I have to say, I do love both of the options being offered there, but the Master Control steel with the black dial for me is the best reason not to bother with a Patek Philippe Calatrava, and, you know, with a price substantially under $7,000. That's one to buy. If you want a simple dress watch with a sporty demeanor from a great brand with a manufacturer movement, you're really going to be hard-pressed to beat that. That said, I am a Reverso fan. All right, friends. Oh, okay. We got a question about the PAM 318. Jason, do you want to touch that?
Where's that?
This is from Fluffy Kitten. The PAM 318. Let me explain this, because this is a controversy from like 8 years ago. The PAM 318 was the New York Boutique limited edition with a picture of the Brooklyn Bridge engraved on the case back. It also featured a completely unfinished Unitas 6497 movement. I want to say it was called like the Calibre 29 or something like that, the OP29 I want to say, but it was a Unitas 6497, a Bausch, like you would get at a watchmaking class. People were offended by this. The movement was never used in any other reference. And in the US, we have a saying, to sell someone the Brooklyn Bridge is to fool them or kind of hoodwink them. And a lot of folks felt this was all too apropos considering the imagery. Jason, do you want to put a bow on this controversy? Because it's been a decade. It's time to close the door.
I mean, listen, Panerai got caught with their pants down, I think, on this one. They tried to, in my estimation, save some cost and get some units. They probably owned a lot of these movements and figured it would be a good way to get rid of them, but they got caught and they learned their lesson.
I would say it's almost a collectible at this point.
But listen, yeah, if we didn't have that debacle, we wouldn't be sitting here with Panerais with full in-house calibers in the range of the line.
I would say this, if you have a chance to buy a 318 at a good price, buy it. It's completely unique, it's famous, it's distinctive, it's almost becoming a cult classic in the sense that A Boy and His Dog is a cult classic. It's so horrendous and disturbing, it almost becomes desirable in its way. All right, final question of the night, well, of our program. We might take one or two more from the chat box, but Nile M is asking. Nile M asks, I recently saw on YouTube your discussion of alternatives to the Patek Philippe Nautilus in steel due to the upcoming 20% price increase to $30,000 US on March 1st. One question I had regarding the AP Royal Oak 15400 ST was the differences between the two movements, considering the difference between the Nautilus and the Royal Oak. What are the differences from a movements perspective? Which one would you say wears more comfortably on a 6 3/4 inch wrist? So a little bit larger than mine, which is roughly 6 1/3, roughly 16 centimeters. He usually likes to wear his watches near his hand above the bones in the wrist. So I would say this. For fit and feel, you got to consider that the Royal Oak 15400 ST at 41 millimeters wears like a 42 or a 43. This is a big watch. It almost wears like a 42 millimeter offshore. For sheer fit and comfort, you want to go with the Nautilus here. But the AP Calibre 3120 is a thicker and tougher caliber by almost a millimeter thicker with a full balance bridge. This is a tougher movement designed for sports watches, whereas the Patek movement was designed for dress watches and found its way into a sports watch. This movement hacks, so you can stop the seconds. And it has a 60-hour power reserve versus 40 to 45 in the Calibre 324 in the Nautilus. For fit and feel, the Patek Philippe Nautilus is much more comfortable. It's a smaller watch in outright dimensions, but it feels 4 or 5 millimeters more compact and silky on the wrist. I would also say the Patek Calibre 324 SC is it's in a case that is far more water resistant. The AP is 50, the Nautilus is 120 meters. It gets the nod on the basis of finish. It is better finished than the AP. It has better anti-magnetism because of the Spiromax silicone hairspring, and retail is currently insane. So Jason, which one do you buy for comfort? Which one do you buy as the collectible? Which one do you buy?
So collectible is definitely the Patek. I think for comfort, I think the Patek also wins. If I was gonna own both, I would say that AP is something that I'd wear every day as an actual sports watch, just because it'll live up to the beating, and the Patek's something I'd throw on the weekends maybe. But both are gorgeous pieces.
Yeah, for me, if you really want to wear a watch on a 6 3/4 inch wrist, try on the AP, please. Maybe try it on a rubber strap, see if your boutique can hook you up. You're still going to have to pay for the bracelet, though, and get the strap as an accessory.
Or go with the 15202.
Yeah, the 15202 is really the comparable here that needs to be compared, because you will be able to get into a 15202 for less than a Nautilus. And it's the original, closest to the Gerald Genta. It's the real comparison with the Nautilus here. But you did specifically ask about the 15400, so I oblige. Okay, from Cam, does anyone see a diving chrono from Rolex in the future? I say no, because that's stepping on Tudor's territory. I think that's been a long tradition from Tudor, and I do not see a diving chrono from Rolex for that very reason. What do you think,
Yeah,
Jason?
it'd be tough to see. It's so outside their ballpark. I just don't see them doing it. They have so many different avenues to go down with some cool product offerings. I don't think they need to reinvent the wheel here.
Jay Sykes saying, Timmy, is it too soon to get a 37mm Royal Oak 3120? Will prices drop further in secondary market? This is the time to buy. I believe that market will stiffen considerably as Audemars Piguet continues to cut down dealers, and they are cutting their dealerships to the bone. I think they're going to be down to like 17 gates in the United States. They're going to be a few marquee dealers and boutiques in about 3 years. So they're cutting distribution, they're taking control of everything, especially the supply of steel Royal Oaks, which brings up the market on everything else that's a steel Royal Oak. Now the 37mm Calibre 3120 is going to be the reference 15300. That's, well, excuse me, that was the 39mm, but it goes for that as well. The 14790 was a 37mm, and it was in its later iterations powered by the 3120. You want to get 37mm and 39mm steel Royal Oaks right now, because as the Nautilus goes up in price, people are going to turn their sights from new Nautilus to new Royal Oak. And as the price of new Royal Oaks and wait lists goes up, people are going to turn their sights from new Royal Oaks to pre-owned Royal Oaks. This is the time to buy. If anything, 37 and 39s are a little bit undervalued right now. So that is where we stand, guys. Now, stay online with me next week through my trip to New York and my first hands-on with the new Navitimer 8 collection by following me at Tim_Masso on Instagram. I think it's important to always share videos whenever I can, and I only get to do 2 or 3 shows a week, so the fun continues on Insta after the camera stops rolling here. So, final question of the night, question for Jason. Would you go for a 1570? Okay, would you go for a 16570 5-digit Explorer 2, or would you go out and get a 5-digit GMT for the same generation?
That's tough. I would say because I want to own the 216570,
yes,
I'd go with the GMT, because I would eventually own both. But at least this way I have something a little bit different in the collection.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, very cool. So, good call, Jason. That's the last word. I'm Tim. This is Watchbox. They're the crew. Thanks for logging on, and I will see you guys again on Wednesday. Tomorrow's Claudio, and then at 6:30 on Watchbox Reviews, Watches Live. Take care. Be well. Thanks.